Thank you, Madam President. Listening to the chairman of the Joint Budget Committee speak here this morning reminded me of a very similar and eerily similar conversation that we had discussing the budget in the spring of 2008 when I came up here and asked you to vote against that budget like I'm going to ask you to vote against this budget, because I could see clouds on the horizon of a recession that had me really worried. And I knew that we weren't putting enough money aside to deal with what was coming. Oh my goodness, we had no idea how bad it was going to be in that spring. It was April that year of 2008 when we were working on this budget. But it was coming, and it was bad, and all of those hard decisions that had to be made in the following few years were made. But they were worse because we spent entirely too much money in 2008, just like we're spending entirely too much money here in 2013. And there are other eerie similarities between this spring and that spring. I'll take you back to 2008. In March of 2008, there was this financial company called Bear Stearns that had collapsed, and the government basically forced J.P. Morgan Chase to purchase them as the first of many bailouts that we would see that year. The stock market then was making new highs, just like it is now. I just looked this up. The national debt at that time, though, was only $9.6 trillion. And we came up here and we asked you to vote against the budget because it didn't save enough money, it spent too much. And the same feeling I have today as I did then. There's some differences. Now our national debt is almost $16.8 trillion, nearly doubled. But look around the world. The banks in Cyprus just reopened with strict capital controls. The Cyprus situation is a little different than Bear Stearns. It's a little closer to the Lehman financial bank failure that we saw in September of 2008, because if you remember, Bear Stearns was bailed out, but the Lehman situation, the Lehman Financial Services Company, was not bailed out because most of the, I think, because most of the investors in Lehman were not from the United States. And if you look at what's going on in Cyprus, the two banks that aren't being bailed out in Cyprus are again, eerily similar in that their depositors that aren't being bailed out, that are actually having their money confiscated, their deposits confiscated, are also not from the EU, they're Russians. Members, we need to be preparing. Did you look at what happened with the unemployment numbers that just came out today? Unemployment is higher than expected. Just like in 2008, we got new numbers for the fourth quarter GDP, and they came in lower than expected. The Chicago Purchasing Managers Index dropped again today, barely above recessionary numbers. Kansas City Fed is reporting negative numbers for industrial investment. And yet we're plowing ahead, spending entirely too much money and putting in place expectations for spending for which there is no way, even in good times, no way we can raise the revenue. None. I hope that we can avoid a recession, but I want to plan for one, and this budget doesn't do that, and that's why we should vote no.